My name is David Postalski. I am a IP attorney and partner at Gearhart Law, and one of the people instrumental in creating this series called the Entrepreneurial Strategy Series. We put it on every month. It's free, it's virtual, it's the last Thursday of the month, 12 p.m. Eastern. And we kind of bring topics that entrepreneurs of all sorts and shapes and sizes need to know. So all of our past ones are posted on the Gearhart Law YouTube channel, so you can check them out, and we can always send you links if you have some difficulty. I'm really excited about today's topic, but before we get to that, I just want to, we did a few shout outs, but I want to introduce one of my colleagues. Her name is Elizabeth Gearhart. She's the Chief Marketing Officer at Gearhart Law, and she just has a few opening words for all of you.
Well, thank you all for coming. Gearhart Law is really happy to be able to present this series. And David, you are not one of the people here involved. He's the driving force behind this, and he does a great job picking topics and getting people. Helen helped us get our people, which you'll meet Helen later. But Gearhart Law is a full service intellectual property law firm. We help entrepreneurs, small businesses, and other people with patents, trademarks, and copyrights. We also do litigation. We have domestic and foreign practices. So if you want to get a trademark on something in England or somewhere, we can do that for you too. So we're located in Summit, New Jersey, but we actually have people all over the world that work for us, and we're online all the time. So if you have a question about intellectual property, feel free to call us or visit our website, gearhartlaw.com, and we'd be more than happy to help you.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. Someone else at the firm that I just want you to meet is Alicia Morrissey. She's like the silent threat behind all of this. She's awesome. She's our programming director. None of this could happen without her as well. So thank you, Alicia. You want to say hi?
That wonderful introduction, David. I'm so happy that everyone's here to join us today. This is a very exciting topic to talk about music copyrights. I'm also excited to hear about it because I'm also a singer myself, and it's a new topic for us for ESS. So thank you all for coming, and thank you, David, and thank you, everyone, all of the panelists today for being here. Thank you.
Awesome. Now, the last introduction is Helen Smith. She is our moderator. Helen, we met Helen. She was one of our interns, one of our legal interns at the law firm, and we just fell madly in love with her. And she came up with this topic herself and really single-handedly put together this amazing panel. It's her show, and I'm really excited for her to do this, and we're excited that you're all here. And so everybody please meet Helen Smith, and she'll say a little bit more about who she is and what she's doing, and the rest of the speakers. So Helen, please take it away.
Hi everyone. I want to thank everyone so much for coming today. My name is Helen Smith. I am a second-year law student at Pace University in New York. I'm focusing on intellectual property and entertainment law, so this was the perfect event for me to host. I had a great time at Gearhart last summer being an intern. I learned so much. My undergrad degree was in music, in singing, so I'm happy to incorporate that in my legal studies now. So now I'm going to quickly introduce the panel, and they can tell you more about themselves. First, we have Jim Carolyn, and then Will Derella, and Rick Marshall. So I'm going to hand it off to them. Jim, you can start if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Helen. Helen was actually one of my interns at Moravian College when she was at Moravian College. So yeah, we loved her too. So my name's Jim Carolyn. I am a songwriter, a producer, and I teach music too. I do a bunch of things in the music industry, like most of us have to do these days. I've had over 100 songs recorded around the world. I've had stuff in movies and TV shows from NBC to Sony and independent stuff. And I had a #2 dance hit which if you notice the way I look like a dance hit songwriter, don't I? So, so it was a crazy, it was basically a crazy thing that happened, and it was fun, and I learned so much from it. And by the time we got done with the dance, with the song kind of petering off the tracks, we had 25 different dance remixes of it released, and then it started going all over the world, and it became as the singer Martha Wash said, it got a little out of hand, but it was all in the good side of getting out of hand. When that stuff happens, it's cool. So that's me, and I'll turn it over to who's next.
Will, do you want to take the
Is that
floor?
me? Hi, I'm William Derella. I'm also friends with Helen Smith and her family. That's my connection to Gearhart. I hadn't worked with any of the lawyers at the firm, but David, great to meet you. Elizabeth, Alicia, we met on the last Zoom. And also let me just mention Helen's mom and I, we co-coached Helen's brother's soccer team with my son. So that's the other connection we have. And actually Helen's brother is my personal trainer. So I've got a lot of connections to Helen. She's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Good crowd. You know, Jim, the bad thing about telling jokes is you can't really hear anyone laugh because they're all muted. But you did great. Let me just tell you, you did great. Anyway, I've been a music manager primarily for a few decades. I've had the pleasure of managing some groups you might have heard of, the Black Eyed Peas, Fergie, Natasha Bedingfield, Sean Paul, actually many others. I won't mention them all, but I have quite a bit of experience in the management area. I've also been a producer of both records and television and live events. And according to this poster on our screens, I'm also an entertainment executive. So, oh, I'm a father of 4 as well, and I'm going on my 33rd year of marriage. So that's
Wow,
what
great.
I bring to this party today. Let's go. Next.
And Rick.
Yeah, hi, I'm Rick Marshall. I have no prior relationship with Helen, so I'm a bit jealous of everybody else here because she sounds like a wonderful person. We've only met once on a Zoom before this call. Unlike the others, I'm just a boring entertainment and copyright attorney. So I have no really great stories to relay right now. But so right now I'm the assistant general counsel at the Mechanical Licensing Collective, where I interface primarily with the digital services. So that's where the money comes in. That's where the digital reporting comes in. So I'm monitoring all of that and testing for compliance and generally making sure that regulations are in place that make for the smooth operation of the MLC. Before I joined the MLC, which is like 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago now, I was with Warner Music on the recorded music side, working mostly in catalog legal affairs. I also was part of the team that handled union negotiations on behalf of the labels with AFM and SAG-AFTRA. I was working on music policy there and a number of other things. And before that, I was with the United States Copyright Office, where I spent a bunch of years working on music-related policy on the Hill. That's me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for being here as well. I'm very excited to have you. So before we get into our discussion, I'm going to give everyone kind of a copyright 101 lesson. So copyright has been around for a few centuries now. Music was one of the most significant art forms in history and has been considered intellectual property since the early 18th century. And in the US, the founding fathers considered the progression of arts and sciences so essential to the growth of our nation that they even included the protection for copyrights in the Constitution in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 8, if you ever want to go take a look. And today, copyrights are governed under the Copyright Act. And what is a copyright? It's a type of intellectual property that protects original works of authorship, so art, music, photography, books, poems, etc. And the protection is guaranteed as soon as the author fixes the work in a tangible form of expression. So this is writing it down, taking a picture, painting, and in order to guarantee total protection on the federal level, that's where you want to register your copyright work with the Copyright Office. And that's what we're here to talk about today, is when you register it, there's extra protection that comes with it. So with copyrights and with your works, you're able to receive royalties for the exchange of rights in the work to others for money. So with music, royalties are generated in 4 categories typically. There's mechanical royalties for physical or digital reproduction and distribution. So this is CDs, streamings, downloads. Public performance royalties, where the music for an artist is performed, recorded, or streamed in public. So this is on TV, bars, clubs, concerts. And these are collected and distributed by performing rights organizations. So some that you may have heard of are ASCAP, BMI, and in Canada, there's CSAC. The third type of royalties are sync royalties, and this is for when music is used in visual media, so like video games and music videos. And the final and least common now type of royalty is print music. So this is for sheet music, when you buy it on Music Notes, if you know that website. So now, our panelists come from different backgrounds, so I kind of want to start the conversation discussing how you guys have experience with royalties in your fields. So I think, Jim, do you want to start? Oh, Jim's muted.
There, am I unmuted? Good.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So copyright royalties. Well, basically, for me, I write a song, I demo it, I pitch it, I pay for the demo, whether we're doing it in a studio or we're doing it on our own, in our own bedroom studios and everything else. So, and then we pitch the demo and we try to get the song recorded. And years ago, it used to be once the song was recorded, you'd start getting what we call mechanical royalties, which were actual sales of the song, something tangible, CDs, records, tapes, for those who go way back, 8-track tapes for those who go even further back, if your dad had in his car. And you got paid for that. And that's where most of us songwriters, if you got a song on a hit album, you wanted to try to get a song on a hit album because it would sell 1 million records and you make, $91,000 off your mechanicals. And publishing companies were kind of built around that too, especially in Nashville, getting songs on records. And then from there, if it happened to be a hit, released as a hit and climbed the charts, then you make a lot of money on the performance end, which is the other part of it, which is ASCAP and BMI, which is basically, we used to call that mailbox money. It would come in later on. It could run 6 months to a year behind, even more in some cases, foreign royalties. And that stuff, if you had a song that got a lot of airplay, that stuff would continue throughout the years. But now that we now have streaming audio almost all the time, that whole mechanical thing is almost out the window, except for the MLC is trying to kind of bring that back into being collected, and I will let Rick talk about that more. And it's a brand new thing for me looking at it. At first, the MLC was not very friendly to get your songs in, but recently they've been extremely helpful, and they call you back. So if you have problems trying to get your songs into the MLC, which collects those royalties, from my understanding, on if you had Spotify free. Those royalties go through the MLC. That's considered a digital mechanical royalty. If I'm wrong about that, somebody please correct me.
That's right.
And then the other royalties we get from like Spotify and all the other streaming audio out there is very, very little compared to the way it used to be. And that's also broken down into artists get a piece, writers get a piece, and and now everybody wants a piece of everything. So now you have 5, 6 writers on a song. Some of them aren't really writers; they're more like the producer, and they're coming in saying, that. So the pie is getting smaller and smaller for guys like me who are just pretty much songwriters. If you're an artist and you're a songwriter and you're doing it yourself, well, obviously you and you're young, you know how to do all the social media stuff and get things going on that, and through gigs and things like that. Also, music in TV and movies has become a big pitch for us songwriters because that's where some of the money is. But even in that case, that money's being driven down further and further to be less and less, because there's more competition out there than there was before, and there's more libraries and things like that. So I think as far as just being a songwriter, it's very, very difficult to just be a songwriter in the music industry right now. Even if you have a publishing deal, and you don't have hits, that's a very difficult thing to do. And that's why a lot of musicians do more than one thing in the music industry. So do managers, so do agents, so do artists, but it's always been that way. But now it's, for guys like me who write songs, you got to do other things. And like, if you hear in the background, I'm at the music store where I teach, so it's another thing going on there. So I think that's all I got, right? Is that okay, Helen? Did I do okay?
Awesome. That was
There
great.
we go. And by the way, I want to say hi to Mark and Rick out there, 2 of my friends who just popped in. So
Awesome. So why don't we turn to Will now, because you represent songwriters, correct?
I do, and I have. And the world has changed dramatically. I think Jim hit the nail on the head. The difference between when we used to release CDs, and although vinyl is still released and CDs are still released, it's a tiny fraction of what the industry had done in the past. I mean, listen, I've been super fortunate. I've had 3 artists whose first album sold over 10 million copies. So Jim mentioned what those mechanical royalties can look like if your talent writes the music. And I've always strived to find artists that really are self-contained, that have the ability to create lyrics and melodies. Many have the ability to produce as well as write lyric and melody. And look, there's a couple of things that we need to unpack for those listening that are putting out music now or thinking about putting out music. First step, make sure you've got a publishing entity. You have to have a lawyer for this. You need to come up with a name and affiliate yourself with one of the PROs. So the PROs are the public performing rights organizations. You may have heard of ASCAP. You might have heard of BMI or CSAC. Those are 3 well-known organizations, but there's more coming online. And if you affiliate with them and you've got all your metadata, which is all the correct information about the song, who the co-writers are, what their publishers are, that's crucial right from the very beginning. Get that set up and get that information aligned with one of these organizations so that they can track it. It becomes your sort of digital fingerprint around the globe. And there is a lot of money that is uncollected. I think Rick Marshall will probably be able to talk about that, with some expertise in terms of his organization, kind of a black box where all this money goes that no one collects because they don't have the right data. They don't have the right information on these songs. In terms of artists, you have to write a great song. Let's be real. A lot of people write songs. Not everybody writes a hit. And a hit has changed. When I first started out, I was taught as a manager, first thing you need to do, You need to get the record company president to like your band. And if they like your band, they started pressing some buttons. They press one button over here and you were on our iHeart Radio. You were visiting Z100 or KISS or one of those stations, or even doing a radio tour. You know, they press another button and my band's videos are on MTV, not just in America, but all around the world. That has changed dramatically. Number one, the record companies don't have that power anymore. They just don't. There's too much competition. There's legal issues that they can't skirt around any longer in terms of getting airplay. And they're in the same game as everybody else in terms of streaming. As Jim mentioned, streaming is the new place where songwriters and artists are making their living, attempting to make their living. Couple of notes, professional musician in the United States makes about $30,000 a year. A professional musician, that's barely a living wage. So there are a lot of buckets, as Helen mentioned, of ways to sort of earn money in terms of royalties if you're a songwriter, but many of them don't pay very much and they're super competitive. I've done literally thousands of syncs for music that I've represented, but I've been fortunate, you know. I have had numerous songs that have won Song of the Year, you know, a Record of the Year, in particular categories, R&B and hip hop, rock and roll, and pop. And so I've kind of been very diversified, but I've also had great writers who are also artists. will.i.am, incredible writer. Just the guy writes 3-4 songs a day sometimes. Wyclef Jean, you know, was in the Fugees, went solo, wrote for Mary J. Blige, wrote for Whitney Houston, wrote for Destiny's Child, and actually kind of broke those groups, and also had his own success. So, you know, if you have a great catalog, there's money out there to be made. But even if you have one song that kind of hits, I think we've all heard of the term one hit wonder. And I think it's been a derogatory term for most of my career, at least. Like, oh, that dude's a one hit wonder. And then, you know, once you have one hit and you realize the possibilities, you're like, wait, that's super successful. And you can do many things. I'll tell a brief story about a woman who is a songwriter, incredible songwriter, named Julie Gold. Not someone I represent, but I spoke on a panel like this with her and she went before me. And she's very, very funny, very eloquent. And her story, someone's practicing in the back.
Somebody's playing a saxophone. I'm sorry.
Okay, it's okay, but auditions are later, Jeff.
We need a sync license for that.
I'll mute myself.
Let me tell you the Julie Gold story. So Julie, you know, was a songwriter, worked at the Brill Building. She just a sort of legend and really, you know, a journeywoman. She ended up writing this one song and it was called From a Distance. I think most of us know it from Bette Midler. Very, very successful song. In fact, it won multiple Grammys. I believe it was Record or Song of the Year, if not both. And she had this song. She actually got this artist, she pitched it to everyone, including legendary Clive Davis. And the way she used to pitch was she used to send a cassette with the lyric sheet and with a note, you know, typed letter. And it would go to all the different record companies, presidents, A&R people, and they would listen to the song. And many of them, sort of, you know how we click reply now to an email? Well, back then what you did was you hand wrote on the letter the person sent and you mailed it back to them. So a couple of weeks later, she got a letter back from Clive Davis who was like, look, it's a lovely song, really beautiful. It's just, you know, not for Whitney Houston because we're only looking for hits. So that was the legendary Clive Davis passing on what became a huge, huge song. First, it was Nancy Griffiths who recorded it, who toured with it, played it live all the time, would always shout out Julie Gold every time she would perform it at a little club. And then one day, Julie heard that Bette Midler was looking for a song. She'd had a hit from a movie, was looking for another song to go in another movie she was doing, and finishing her album, and that song became From a Distance. And it was massive, but it's really her only hit. And when she did this sort of talk before me, she had a bag that she brought out. It was like a backpack. It was filled with stuff. The first thing she brought out was like this doll, and you squeeze the doll's hand and it was like, From a Distance. And then, you know, she opened 2 different music boxes and it played the melody of From a Distance. And then she brought out like a dozen or 15 books that were children's books called, you name it, From a Distance. And they were in 15 or 17 different languages. So with just that one copyright, she was able to turn that into really its own cottage industry from a distance. So being a one-hit wonder is not a terrible thing. It's actually a pretty good thing. And in fact, my client Fergie, she had a song called Fergalicious. Some of you may know that song. One of my favorites. It was a song that the record company didn't think was a hit either. They didn't think she had any hits on her record, in fact. And Fergalicious did become a hit all around the world. #1 most places, #2 in America in the Hot 100. But it became a brand for Fergie. She trademarked that name in addition to having her copyrights for the song. And she had a very super successful shoe business for 11 years called Fergalicious. It's literally sold over 10 million pairs of shoes called Fergalicious. Her #1 selling wine. She has a winery. Ferguson Crest is the name of the winery, but her #1 her #1 wine is called Fergalicious. It's a red wine blend. She also had a cosmetics line through Wet n Wild called Fergalicious. So there's lots of ways to take that's in this case the title, and of course her song was synced to probably more than 100 movies and television shows around the world. So there's a lot of ways to if you're protected and your rights are set and your metadata is correct, there are ways to make money, but it is getting more difficult without question due to streaming. And hopefully we're going to see that change. We're going to see publishing rates go up. Honestly, I think, in my opinion, the master should get half and the song, meaning the total 100% of the song publishing and writing, should get the other half. That's how I think streaming should go. I happen to be a lobbyist for the Recording Academy. We're going to talk about some of the things that we've been doing there, like the American Music Fairness Act and other initiatives. But we'll save that for a little bit. Anyway, I'll let somebody else talk for a minute.
No, that was great.
Otherwise, you guys will never shut me up. I'll tell stories for the next hour.
Please.
I hope that was helpful, and I sort of answered any questions that might be in the chat, which I'll check on right now to see what questions there are.
Yeah, that was great. And we can jump back to any questions at any point. So Rick, why don't we turn to you now? So you're kind of just in the mix of mechanical royalties right now with the MLC. So could you tell us a little bit about like the development of the MLC?
Yeah, sure. So I joined the MLC roughly 1 year into its almost 3-year existence. So I wasn't there for the from scratch building process, although I was kind of involved at the policy level because I was working for a record label, and I was involved with the RIAA, and we were working on some of the issues that touched record labels as part of the creation of the MLC and the regulations that govern the MLC. Let's put it that way. But I've heard it described in the early days and even into some of my early tenure as building the plane while you're flying it. I think if Chris were here, that's what he would say. And it was a lot like that. It was just, it was a little precarious at first, but the goal was always to make sure that we were timely distributing royalties as the statute required. And for the most part, we accomplished that. We've made over 24 distributions on time or early. We've distributed roughly $1 billion in royalties to songwriters and publishers and copyright owners, which is a very a monumental watershed moment for us. It's just happened. We have a match rate of almost 90%. That's matching dollars to musical works, dollars from recordings used by digital services to musical works that can then be claimed by owners. So we have about a 90% match rate after reprocessing happens, which is kind of the best that the industry has seen. We have over 30 million works registered in our database. I saw William Gary mention that it's really easy to register those works these days, and we've iterated on our tools and our technology to try and make that the case. We've implemented a best-in-class customer support team that is really there to serve writers and publishers and you to make sure that you can get your works registered and any questions are answered quickly. And in general, we've tried to create a level of transparency in the way digital services report and how the money is passed through to writers, publishers, copyright owners that really hasn't been seen before. So yeah, so we're in it. This is I'm in royalties every day, and it's an exciting place to be. And just to clarify too, because I'm not sure if this came up, but the MLC administers an audio-only digital mechanical license that was created by Congress in the Music Modernization Act, right? And it handles formats like streaming, download, and some other digital-only configurations, right? And only those that are subject to the blanket compulsory license that's in the Copyright Act in Section 115, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with.
Yeah, and for those, just to clarify again, so the Music Modernization Act was passed in 2021, or it was instated in 21.
I think 2018 is when it actually passed, maybe a little bit later.
Yes.
But the blanket digital mechanical license became effective on January 1st, 2021.
Yes. So the blanket license is what the MLC, they were formed by the Copyright Office to handle the blanket license for the audio-only royalties. So the MLC is different from Sound Exchange. I want to answer this one question. You don't have to be in both. Rick, can you help me answer this?
What's the question?
The difference between the MLC and Sound Exchange. They handle two different types of royalties.
Yeah. So the MLC and Sound Exchange are similar in that they are both organizations. In both cases, there is a license, a compulsory license created by Congress, right? Sound Exchange deals with Section 114. The MLC deals with Section 115. And in both instances, Congress has given an administrative agency the authority to designate a single collective to deal with the royalties related to those two sections of the Copyright Act. Now, Sound Exchange deals specifically with the digital performance of sound recordings, right? So that's money that's traditionally paid to artists and labels and the other distributor organizations that deal with artist royalties and sound recordings. The MLC in Section 115 deals with the digital reproduction and distribution of musical works, so songs, colloquially, right? And so that's where they differ, right? So I mean, like, to answer the very beginning of the question, yeah, you should sign up for both. If you're entitled to artist royalties, sign up with Sound Exchange, because they pay artists directly. They pay a portion by statute. They're required to pay a portion of royalties they collect on behalf of a particular sound recording, one to the label and one to the artist, percentage to the label, percentage to the artist. And with the MLC, you need to register your work so that you are paid for any time a sound recording, including your work, is streamed on a digital service or downloaded, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, sign up for both.
Awesome.
That's good stuff. Hey, could I interject here? I mean,
yeah, go for it.
I love what Rick's talking about, and I'm so glad that we passed the Music Modernization Act. It was well overdue. And although, we want those royalties to get higher, it's still a good starting place. And, people are getting paid. You just really need tonnage. And if you're a songwriter, it's much more difficult than, say, if you're an indie artist and you own some of the master or even all of the master. There's much more money on the master side than there is on the songwriting side. I just wanted to bring up, people were asking about revenue streams and syncs and things like that. And radio in particular, is a thorn in my side. I mean, it was a blessing for me in having, too many number ones to mention, which is a good problem. But people getting paid from radio, has always been a challenge. And the reason is that radio stations do pay the songwriter, by the way. So songwriters are covered. There's royalties that are set for them, and that is distributed through the performing rights organizations. They collect those royalties and they pay them to the songwriters. And there's a lot of money there. There's no question. Where there's no money is if you are a singer, if you are an engineer, a producer, you're a bass player, a drummer, a background singer, you own the master, you don't get anything when your songs are played on the radio. And so the Recording Academy and a bunch of paid lobbyists and volunteer lobbyists, me volunteer lobbyists, I don't get paid for it, have been fighting for several years for something called the American Music Fairness Act. And what that act proposes is that radio stations pay a portion of their income, of which, by the way, iHeart and Entercom and all these large chains make billions of dollars a year, and they do not pay for the songs to be played on the radio stations. In fact, the United States is only one of 3 countries in the world that don't pay the performers and the people who recorded the music for their airplay. The other countries, by the way, are China, Iran, and North Korea. So we're not in very good company there. And in fact, all the other countries do pay the musicians. They pay for radio play. So we are losing out because we don't reciprocate with those foreign countries. For example, England, France, Germany, they all pay the musicians, the engineers, all the people who created the music, not the songwriters. Songwriters, a different bucket. And we lose out on about $200 million a year in reciprocal royalties that we could receive from these countries for them playing our music. But because our radio stations don't play English artists, pay English artists for their music being played on the radio, they don't pay us. So we did get this through committee at the end of last year. And by the way, our act is called the American Music Fairness Act. Not really catchy. I mean, maybe AMFA's catchy, but it's not really catchy. The other side has a beautiful one. It's like the Local Radio Freedom Act. The Local Radio Freedom Act. And I would tell Congress people that, you know, or senators that I would speak with in my lobbying and be like, you guys got to come up with better names. The other side has a really catchy name. Sounds like they're doing something good, local radio. And their argument is always that local radio, you know, can't afford to pay this. Okay, well, that's for small stations, tiny stations, NPR stations, college stations. They pay like $10, $100 a year. That's it. But if you're making billions from advertising, and the only way you're doing that is by playing music all day, you're a music station, you got to pay for that. You got to cut somebody in. And by the way, it would make a huge difference if we could get that windfall of reciprocal monies from overseas, because we start paying people here. And also we could maybe get these professional musicians to get out of making $30,000 a year as their living. Like you can't survive like that. So I just wanted to bring that up. American Music Fairness Act is making strides. It had to be reintroduced because we didn't get to a vote on the floor at the end of last year. And of course, Congress has changed hands. So it's going to be interesting, but we do have Republicans and Democrats working together on the American Music Fairness Act, which is a good sign. And it's moved out of committee again. And hopefully we're going to see a vote for it sometime soon. So I just wanted to bring that up. That's like a massive amount of revenue that could be, you know, paid out to creators in the US and around the world, but it's not happening. So keep an eye on that space.
Yeah, that's great to bring up. Everybody definitely keep an eye on that. I'm looking to see if we have any other questions. There was one I had. I'm going to bring up a question that I received prior to today. This is from, the email is JD Bid Desk. The question is a little long, so I'm going to paraphrase. He owns the rights to an instructional guitar method book that he wrote for Warner Bros. Education Division about 40 years ago. He has, just before it was published, they sold off that division and the rights were returned to him. And he would like to sell the rights to the book and some music teaching aids that he had also developed and published. So maybe we could talk about the different, like how the transfer of rights could happen in that situation, I guess. Rick, do you want to talk about that maybe a little bit?
Well, sure. I mean, it sounds like if he owns the rights to that publication outright, then he has the right to freely transfer it as he sees fit. I mean, I guess I would recommend talking to one of the attorneys at Gearhart Law and having them go through the copyright registration process for him if he hasn't done that already, or just making sure that the rights aren't encumbered by the former company that owned them or licensed them. Yeah, and then going from there. But you know, based on what you recited, it sounds like it to me.
Mm. All right. And then we have another question coming in, general to the panel, to everyone. What are your thoughts on the transformation from analog to digital? Will, I saw your face light up for that one.
Well, I mean, well, it's a question of, you know, are we just talking about like, you know, audio quality in that regard and recording, or, you know, something else? I mean, I think that the on demand, the ability, look, more music is being consumed than ever in the history of the world right now. And that's a good thing and a bad thing. In terms of major labels, it's becoming a bad thing in that they're continuously, year over year, losing market share to independent artists who are finding ways to you know, get a tremendous amount of streams. Most labels today are not even really that interested in radio. Ironically, you know, radio was always this holy grail. Like if you got on the radio, you're like, holy shit, I'm on the radio, right? And people used to say, oh, my song sounds so good. I just heard it on Z100. And I always said it sounds good because it's on the radio. You know, I mean, you know, you feel great. It's on the radio. So switching back to streaming and sort of that digital on demand space, barring sort of the recording side of the analog, you know, I think that there is a pretty level playing field. Anyone can get, you know, get 1 billion streams, and they literally can. We've seen it happen to more than, I think, well, starting with TikTok, which is another area where there is a revenue stream there, albeit very, very tiny for music. But that is the newest place for discovery. There's no question that is the #1 place, both for us to discover, but also for executives. And you're seeing tons of stuff. I think over 150 artists were signed from TikTok last year, 2 major labels. And part of the reasoning is that because the major labels are not that interested in radio any longer as their main focus, you know, it costs them money to travel artists, to do lots of things, hire independents to help promote their songs at radio, etc. And radio is late because radio is pretty much following whatever's the top 50 in Spotify or Apple Music. They're following what's happening in digital. And I think on the digital front, you know, they're signing these TikTok artists who have a lot of views on TikTok because they're seeing a direct correlation to streams. So every quarter, basically, major labels look, how many streams do I have? And that determines what percentage of income, of revenue they're going to receive from the streaming outlets. And it's big. I mean, we're talking, you know, 50 million, 100 million. That's the kind of money that's being distributed quarterly. And if you go up a point or two, you know, in your aggregate streams, you know, that could be the difference, you know, a 10 or $20 million difference in terms of what your company is going to receive. So they're pretty much looking for things that are going to stream. They're much less in the artist development world than they used to be. Someone said to me the other day, there's no way Adele would get signed today. And, you know, I don't know. Maybe she would, maybe she wouldn't. I personally think Adele is an incredible artist, and if she used TikTok to tell her stories about her neighbors or whatever, you'd probably be following her, and you'd probably be listening to her music, even if she wasn't on a major label. But she also is a creator who writes, so that's really being self-contained for anyone on this call that is a creator. If you're able to write, if you're able to produce, and even able to perform, you know, you've got a leg up. You know, whether or not you write great songs or not, that's a different problem. And in terms of technology, I remember Jim mentioning something about, you know, the kids today are using TikTok and social media. And yeah, they've got all these broadcast outlets that are available to them. Like right now, you know, get on Zoom and talk to your 10 fans, your 50 fans, whatever. It's hand-to-hand combat out there for artists and songwriters today. But I think if you do create quality material, you know, you have a better shot than most. Anyway, that's my little 2 cents on that front.
Great.
Or 17 cents, maybe. I'm not sure. A quarter?
If there's any other questions, please throw them in the chat and we'll
I think Jim's trying to get in there, but the mute
yeah,
is on.
David, could you mute Jim?
I'm never unmuting again.
I'm unmuted. I switched around, so hopefully you won't hear the saxophones. I got my ear things in. But two things. One, going back to the gentleman who wrote a guitar book. I teach guitar. The pretty much Hal Leonard is the publishing company that does a lot, and Alfred is another one that does a lot of print publishing of music books. And I believe Hal Leonard is actually owned by Warner Brothers. Not exactly sure, but I think they're a division of Warner Brothers. So that's where you probably have to go to one of those publishing outlets that does paper publishing still to try to get your book published, your guitar method published. And there was another question here just about pitching songs and things like that, and that you have your catalog. Does ASCAP help? Do I get an agent? The answer is you really got to do it yourself. And then once you start doing it yourself, just like artists, then other people might start to pay attention to you because they know you're serious. And I know a lot of people don't have a lot of time to do that, but there's pitch sheets out there. There's you can get your stuff in movies or TV with music supervisors. That's an online type of library. You can pitch songs to, put your songs in, and then music supervisors for movies come through and listen to your songs and pick them. I've had stuff picked up that way. The music and just the American Music Fairness Act sounds very interesting, and it would be very nice to get more of the fairness across the board. But I do know some radio station owners, and they're fighting it tooth and nail. And yeah, they have a much sparklier name. And also I have to tell you, the name of my song that was a hit was called "I'm Not Coming Down." David's shaking his head over here. Elizabeth, they both emailed me and said, what is the name of your song? So it's called "I'm Not Coming Down" by Martha Wash, who sang "It's Raining Men" was her first hit. Her other big hit was "Everybody Dance Now," CC Music Factory. In fact, she actually sued CC Music Factory and Sony because they didn't want to put her name on the original album. And she won that suit. And because of that, everybody's supposed to have their names, at least the singers are supposed to have their names on the records, which gets into David's metadata part on songs. And my son is now very big into that. He talks about that, and it just runs kind of circles around my brain sometimes because he can track songs in many different ways across the internet for a couple of independent publishing companies and independent record labels he's working for. So I think as far as songwriters go, you're all right. You should be self-contained. You should write great songs. If you don't know how to write great songs, I suggest you go to Nashville, you join NSAI, not because you're going to write country songs, but you're going to learn from the best. And there's tons of songwriters in Nashville that write other stuff. And that's just my 2 cents on that one. So back to you, Helen.
We love Nashville.
Or get a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
That's another
Yes,
one.
definitely.
Yes.
Will, I want to hop back to you on the.
Yeah, on the analog digital front, I noticed that you also, I'm not sure whose name that was, but they had asked about e-mastering. And also, I mean, I think, vinyl happens to be the number one, I think, physical configuration today, which is kind of crazy because that was sort of the old analog, that we were used to before CDs came around. In terms of e-mastering or taking your, do-it-yourself or independent song that you've created, There is software out there to do some e-mastering, some slight compression if you want to sort of, raise any of the frequencies, the low end, the mid end, or the high end. They're really simple to use, and they're effective. I find that a lot of songs that come across my desk that haven't been mastered sound incredible. Don't really need mastering. I mean, we used to spend so much money. I mean, millions of dollars spent on mastering every year by major labels. Many independent artists couldn't afford to go to those high-end studios. A lot of that was done really for radio and to have consistency, because radio puts a lot of compression on music as it goes out. So a lot of times you hear vocals get pushed to the center front because of that. And sometimes artists don't want that. So a lot of times they'll master on their own and come up with the way they want it to sound, either adding compression or not, or leaving off compression, knowing that it might get played on the radio. But I don't think it makes a huge difference. I do think that mastering today is very inexpensive through software. And if you feel like, your mix isn't perfect, and mastering can sometimes add a nice layer, sort of like hitting the old loudness button for anybody who used to have a stereo, press the loudness button, and it really brought out all frequencies from low to mid to high. It kind of boosted everything. But, I think if you have a good mix, you don't necessarily need that for streaming. Also, I saw some things about AI. I don't know, Helen, am I jumping ahead? Were you going to bring up AI?
I was actually just about to go into that because
Okay.
in my meeting with Rick, I was talking about how now we're starting to see AI being used a lot in music, and people are, one, they're creating music by using AI as either an assistant, or they're making the AI compose the music all together and produce it. And then they're also using AI to put on virtual concerts in the metaverse, where they're creating these avatars and they're putting on full-blown concerts all together, and you can buy tickets to the metaverse to go watch these concerts. And Rick and I were talking about who would have the rights in a situation like this, I guess to the level that the AI is being used. So Will, do you want to pick up what you were about
Sure.
to say?
I mean, first of all, let me just tell a story about AI. So I guess it was like 2010. 2010, and released this album called The End by the Black Eyed Peas. It was led by a song called Boom Boom Pow, and then followed with a song called I Got a Feeling. And then the third song.
Small songs. Those are just small songs, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like I'm like sick of hearing myself talk. I feel like it's like, okay, pat yourself on the back some more, but I can't help it. It's just who I am and what I've done. So we made a video for the third song. It was called I'm a Bee. It was my favorite song on the record. And I actually made a video that was two songs, I'm a Bee / Rock That Body. And it was about 8 or 10 minutes long. The opening of the video, the Black Eyed Peas are in the studio and they're working on something. And Fergie walks in and she's like, what's up? I'm ready to do my vocals. And Will's like, oh, you don't have to do your vocals. She's like, what? He's like, oh yeah, the computer already did your vocals. What? What are you talking about, Will? It's like, oh yeah, no, I got this machine now. It's recorded everything you've ever said or sung, and you just take your voice and it can turn it into a song. And also for all the words we've written of all the different records that we've created, all the different albums and stuff, it'll also write the lyrics for us. So basically I just press a couple buttons and like, boom, man, the thing sings for you, Fergie. It'll rap for you, Tab and App. And we don't even have to write the stuff. And Fergie's like, what? What are you talking about, Will? Like, we're not freaking robots. And she storms out of the studio. That was 12 years ago. And now we literally are seeing that happen.
To even like a greater extent, yeah.
These chat bots will write. I actually did a thing the other day. It was like, hey, could you write my bio to AI chatbot, whatever it was, one of them? And literally in like 5 seconds, there was like a 3-page bio on me. It was pretty good. Not the one that you guys use, but anyway, I'm going to revise it now that I got that. Well, first of all, in terms of record labels have signed some AI artists. The who owns it. If you've created it, you own it. You're going to have to protect it with a really good law firm, but ultimately you own it if you have not infringed on anybody else's rights, meaning that this character that you've created, doesn't look exactly like Trippie Redd for some reason and sound like him when he raps. That's where I see legal problems happening. But like anything else, if you create something, from scratch, even if it's your computer creating it on your device, you can own that. It's something you can own, something you can trademark, something you can copyright. And we're going to see whether people dig it or not. I still, a virtual concert's okay. We went through it during, COVID, watching people virtually, but a virtual concert with a virtual, I don't even want to say being, character, a virtual character, artist, it's kind of weird. But prior to the AI, sort of taking hold like it is right now, holograms had been the thing. So people were creating holographic characters that were not based on, Prince or Michael Jackson or somebody that had previously passed, but actually like a new pop star, and then tour that holographic pop star around the country. This happened in Japan and other parts of Asia. So, I mean, it's kind of the Wild West. It's going to be interesting. I'm not sure, we'll probably see some hits. Clearly, algorithms are going to learn more and more about us and what we like and serve us things that, are sticky and that we'll continue to go back to, as TikTok has proven over and over and over. But look, I still believe in the human condition. I believe in real artists delivering things. I think it needs that. What memories is the AI going to draw on if they're a singer-songwriter AI character? I don't know. Obviously, if you feed it stuff, it'll make up shit. So it can work, but I do think we have this innate desire and ability to connect really with what's human. In fact, I think the most successful artists and songwriters are ones that are the most human. I'd like to say, the storytellers. I mean, Bob Dylan. Okay, I mean, it's just one of the greatest songwriter of our generation. Clearly, I mean, maybe he's a robot. I don't know. He could be from another planet. We use the term alien a lot for people who are extremely talented and gifted. But AI, I mean, it's not really my thing, but I get it, and I see it out there, and I do think there are protections. Maybe the lawyers can let us know how they're protected or not, if I'm not correct. So there you go.
Rick, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think where a lot of the legal attention is right now is what constitutes human authorship, right? The Copyright Office has come down and said basically that if there is no human authorship, a work can't be protected by copyright or registered for copyright protection. That's one bar. But now the next question is, well, what is human authorship, right? And so filling in that is going to be tricky. I think the Patent and Trademark Office has done a series of roundtables and studies on this. The Copyright Office launched recently a notice of inquiry, like kind of information gathering process to try and get more information about this. And actually I saw something yesterday that I didn't fully digest yet, but it was something that the Copyright Office issued, an opinion on a work that had been registered and then was up. The registration was under review as to whether they would cancel it. And they had some interesting language in that letter that said something about prompts. So when you're talking to a AI bot and you kind of give it some general instructions, like make me a picture that looks like this person standing on a dystopian landscape that's about this age, et cetera, that those prompts alone might not be enough to actually check the creativity requirements that you need for copyright protection and to check the human authorship box. So yeah, anyway, all that to say, it's kind of the Wild West right now, and really on a lot of people's radars, and will hopefully be sorted soon, or at least a lot of very thoughtful people will weigh in, and we'll get a better landscape of what it might look like in the future. Yeah.
Interesting. William Shaw. Yeah. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, well, I was going to say, William just said something before that AI is kind of like what you put in and then it makes shit up. That's pretty much what songwriters do. And it's usually because we're eating lunch first and then we make shit up afterwards. But as a songwriter, going forward, some of these folks here, I believe my friend Rick Denson, who's down further, we had a discussion about that whole AI that put out what was it, finished a Beethoven symphony or something in Europe, or written some other stuff, and it came out like, wow. I can foresee record companies going, what do we need artists for when we can get a graphic artist to come up with a really cool AI thing, or an AI to come up with the music that everybody likes? Or take it a step further, how about radio stations? If we just have AIs creating music that everybody likes, why do we need artists? Why do we need songwriters for that realm? Other than we get back to you still need I still think as people, you need what William said, is that you need that human connection. And I think AI is going to take quite a while before they even get to that. But I can see like commercial companies like Coke coming up with stuff they put into this AI computer. We want to sell between 18 and 20 or 18 and 30 years old people. We want music that's behind that they're going to like behind that, and make them want to go out and buy Coke. So I could see that happening. So as again, as a songwriter, it's getting more and more difficult. And as an artist, you got to be unique in what you do and great at what you do, probably even more than before, because there is hardly any development going on by record labels anymore. And so as far as AI goes, it's scary all over in general. I don't think it's as far as it's going to be yet, although it's kind of cool. My son has a whole avatar with a streaming thing that looks at him and mimics him and sings like him, and he's taken his recordings and put the avatar in a recording studio, singing and playing and doing all that stuff with the background, and nobody even knows what my son looks like, but they know what the avatar looks like. And and he wants it that way, so it's kind of interesting to me.
By the way, Coke gets what you're talking about. I mean, it started with when they started putting polar bears instead of people in their commercials. They don't have to pay the polar bear.
Right.
No money for the polar bear. Actor costs a lot more money.
Unless you're managing the polar bear, then I'm sure you get a lot of money out of Coke.
I tried, Jim. I couldn't get him. He passed on me. He went with a koala bear in Australia, who's some big time manager. I don't know. Rick, I mentioned Bob Dylan in my last little soliloquy. I noticed your poster of Bob Dylan there, and also who was it? David Mulford said his grandparents in Hibbing used to babysit Bob Dylan as a kid. Bob Dylan once told me, never drop names, David. So bear that in mind. Actually, hey, it's
That's
good.
great.
Actually, Kevin Bacon told me that Bob Dylan told him never drop names, and I was like, "Can I use that, dude?" And he was like, "Yeah." And that's the true. That's the true story. On the AI front, there's another part of AI that we're not talking about, which is algorithms, right? Like for playlisting, etc. We see it in the streaming services. We obviously see it in Amazon. Everything we use, there's an algorithm guiding us, prodding and pushing us to a place they want us to go to. For any creators out there, anybody distributing your own music, trying to figure out how to get playlisted, or a lot of people are buying into playlisting. Like, hey, I'll get you 1 million streams for 10 grand. But how, dude? Oh, I got a playlisting network. Oh, it's not bots, it's real people. So you're like, all right, here's 10 grand. Boom, your song starts getting 10,000 streams a day, 20,000 streams a day. And soon as it hits 1 million, it starts going down. And that first 1 million, the percentage of people that save the song, that don't skip the song, they're all well, skip the song, a lot of people do. It's a passive thing. You're just on a list. It's like, oh, the fitness playlist. Oh, the Italian romantic dinner playlist. Oh, the whatever, pick a playlist, right? Just type it in and these playlists will come up and you might have a song on there and it's playing in the background. Someone might, oh, what is that song? And go to their phone or their computer or whatever to save it, but it's highly unlikely. So if you're going to use the algorithm correctly, the algorithm in Spotify, for example, just stay on that one, it will reward you as a creator for your song if you have engagement. So If you want to use playlisting third party, that's fine to get started, to create a small little fire, to start getting some streams happening besides, you know, your friends or your family. Or I think everybody can get 3,000 streams. Like that's your whole family network around the world. Like that's 3,000 streams. But, you know, try to get to 1 million. It's hard. So what happens if you're smart about it? You'll work on the engagement side. And the way you do that is actually not making it super easy to hear the song, but making it a little more challenging. So you might get on a playlist and get going, but now you have to start reaching out to folks, and you need to give them a reason. Like you need to bring them into who you are as an artist. So you might say, even if you're spending like say $50 a day, okay, in Instagram or Facebook to promote your Spotify song, most people will want that to go straight to the stream, right? The least friction possible. That's what we're taught. No friction. That's how, you know, great apps work. For example, no friction, right? You're like, Alexa, play Louis Armstrong. Boom, it plays Louis. You don't have to press anything, doing it. It just plays it. If you want to be specific, play it in living room. And so what happens with these algorithms is if you make people jump through a couple of hoops, so you're like, here, check out my song. They then get to a landing page and it's Helen Smith's song. And they're like, oh, Helen's cute. Oh, and the song's playing again. And now there's a tree of listen to it on Spotify, listen to it on Amazon, Apple, whatever. If you now go that extra step, and not everyone will, but the ones that do, the minute they get to their service, let's call it Spotify, and the song starts playing, they're like, oh, I love this. They've heard it 3 times now. And they immediately hit that heart. You know, you could have a lot less streams, but a tremendous amount of engagement, and the algorithm will start to reward you. It will start placing your song on these algorithmic playlists, of which Release Radar is one, Radio is another one. There's tons. There's Discover Weekly, and it's just little moves. You're really, what you're looking for is your song to have. Let's say you only have 1,000 streams, but half of those people have saved it. You're going to do a lot better than someone who got 100,000 streams and only had 10% save it. So that's just food for thought as you sort of try to, you know, hunt down fans, literally, you know, one by one, and get them to do things. It's all right to use a little marketing, like old school marketing, where people do jump through a few hoops, because if they do, they're going to be listening to, they're going to not only save it, but you'll see they're probably in the 3 to 4 times they listen to it, right? We have this information, this data. How I got all these streams, but like, how many people listen to it? And typically, like on 1 million streams, only maybe 100,000 to 200,000 listen to it, right? Like the other ones are listening to it 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and that's helping it move up. So just something to think about. I thought I'd throw in a little marketing AI on the Spotify front for any creators on this call. I'm done.
On the recording side, which some of you probably know, there's those algorithms, there's Easy Drummer, there's now Easy Keyboard, there's all kinds of stuff that you can use to play on your songs, which is really cool. Sometimes you can get it through people, then they don't recognize it, especially, it depends on, I guess, the type of music you're doing. But so there's other algorithms and other AIs, if you want to call them AIs, out there that you can use. And also one other thing, I just want to go back real quick on songs and mastering and things like that. Songwriters tend to pitch songs that the vocals are up on because you want to hear the words. So when you're mastering or mixing your own stuff, because I see some people on this are artists and some people on this want to pitch songs. Depends on who you're pitching to and what you do. So you might need more than one mix of your song when you're out there pitching it. And it might not be that much of a difference. Just take the vocals down a little bit if you're going to release a record because you want them. Just depends on the music you're doing. But that's another thing out there with so back to you, Helen.
Yeah, I think we have maybe one more question. William, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
Me?
No, William Gary.
Oh, I was like, I raised my hand. I didn't know it. William Gary.
I don't know if he can unmute himself, David.
Oh yeah, I think you have to unmute him.
I'm asking him to.
Okay. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
I wanted, Rick is really quiet, but I know the MLC can be confusing. And I found it helpful with the MLC to understand the history of why it became into existence in the first place. And then I also want to nudge Rick to share, or I think Rick should share the MLC social and YouTube channel, because they do a really great job on educating, and they have webinars, and you can really understand. You could literally understand the rest of the collection agencies from the content that the MLC is putting out about how their process works. So, but I do think everyone would benefit from understanding why the MLC exists and what the situation was prior to.
Yeah, Rick, the MLC has like monthly webinars, right? They've been doing those.
Yeah, I swear I didn't plant that question, but thank you so much, William. That's a really great question.
That was a good.
Yes, you should find the MLC socials. I don't have the exact handle, but
I think it's at
MLC
MLC on Instagram.
Yeah. I mean, there's an Instagram account for the MLC. Our CEO has an account that's run through the organization too. We have a really, really great marketing team that's out everywhere writers and publishers are, at conferences, at events, trying to encourage people to sign up. Our member services team is also out on the ground, just trying to reach writers and publishers where they are. Like I said, I'm doing presentations like these. Chris is everywhere doing legal presentations. We're trying to reach everybody that possibly could register their works, to get them to register their works, to make matches, to help us make sure that we can distribute the money that the digital services are sending us to them for their works each time their works are used by those digital services. So yeah, please check out the socials and everything else. And also, as William mentioned, on our website, we have lots of great resources for writers, publishers, people just generally interested in copyright or royalties. Great flowcharts, great webinars, it's all there. Write me and I can point you in the direction of it if you need to. The impetus for the MLC, I mean, like the really short way to put it is that before the MMA, at least the part of the MMA that created the MLC, or the new digital blanket licensing regime, was put in place because before it, there was a one-to-one compulsory license system where if you were a digital service and you wanted to play 100 million songs and you couldn't directly identify the owners of those songs so that you could get a license from them directly, you had to serve a notice of license or a notice of intent to use their work on either on that person or on the Copyright Office, right? And what was happening there is there was just a lot of royalties being lost in translation, right? Because the services couldn't find the individuals that they needed to either license from or pay, right? And in some instances, they weren't actually getting the licenses that they needed correctly. So there's a big problem. And on one end, the services had a big problem because they were liable for infringement lawsuits. On the other end, the writers and owners of those works weren't getting paid. So, I mean, this is like a shorthand for it, but that was kind of the reason that this massive consensus was brought together to try and create a solution to this problem. And the solution they came up with was expanding the Section 115 license and creating this digital blanket license, and then creating an organization to administer that license. And that's what the MLC is. And so, yeah, so now all of their usage and all of their licensing is run through the MLC. We collect reports of usage from the digital services. We collect money from the digital services. We run it through our matching database. We match everything that we can to the works that have been registered in our database, and we pay it out directly to rights owners. We don't take an administrative fee. Our budget is set by the government and paid by the digital services. So it's really an organization that is for the industry. And so, yeah, I mean, going back to what we started with in the very beginning, like, Jim mentioned metadata and how important it is. We like to say that data drives dollars, and to play your part. So make sure your metadata is in order. Make sure that you have all of the works that you have created. You understand your rights to those works, register those works. And that's the play your part. Register those works, play your part, and you'll collect royalties from the MLC for those works. That's right. Sorry, that's my quick pitch.
Perfect.
If that answers the question.
On
Uh,
on the songwriting side of the MLC, Helen and I,
Oops.
when she
Did it-
was
oh,
with
Here we go.
when Helen was with my publishing company when she was at school, she kind of set up the initial MLC stuff with us. And it wasn't working very well. In fact, it took like a year to get something improved. But once the MLC started kicking in, for those people out there, there's tons of videos to help you. There's tons of they actually called me back, which was something that try to get Pro Tools to call you back on anything that goes wrong. It never happens. So the MLC is really cool that way, and I have to really hand it to those guys because they really are stepping up and making it work and helping out the end users like me, who's sitting there going, okay, now I have to figure out how to put my songs in, and there's a little video on how to do that and how to link publishers and things like that. So as somebody who does it all by myself, or with Helen's help before, it's kind of it's really, at first I thought it was daunting, but as I got into it, it actually made pretty good sense and pretty easy to start figuring out. So commend Rick and his whole team there, because I really thought it was going to be a slow train wreck, and it's not. Now, I haven't got paid anything from them, so I'll wait to see what how that works in another 6 or 8 months, when things start to sync up. But but going forward, as if you're an artist of any type, getting back to that metadata, they need those numbers, to track your songs on the MLC. And how do you get those numbers? Well, you can register your stuff at ASCAP or BMI, and they will generate those various numbers to try to so the MLC can track them too. And also there will be mistakes in all of this. There's mistakes in your ASCAP and BMI things, and so just you have to be vigilant as a songwriter, as an artist, to make sure all your metadata is right. YouTube is terrible at keeping my metadata on things. As a songwriter, it sucks. Also, I noticed with my students, nobody's really checking out who's playing songs. They're listening to it on their ear pods, and they bring in a song. They say, I want to learn the song. And I'm like, who's it by? And they're like, no, I don't know. I just heard it on Spotify. And that connection, which was what William got back to, that's connecting with your audience so they know who you are. And a lot of artists don't do that or want to do that. And that's really what you need to do. And as a songwriter, you need to do that too. If you want to connect with other songwriters, other producers, to write with them and things like that, you are still a brand, if you want to call it that. And you still need to be able to connect with people, because you're broadening your scope of people you're working with in the industry, and you never know where the next cut's going to come from, or you might be there when they turn around and go, hey, don't you have a song about screaming hot dogs? And somebody goes, yeah, I do. And well, we need it for a commercial. You just might be that person, I know you're laughing at it, but I have
She wants to know what the melody is for the screaming hot dogs.
Well, I had a song from back in the 80s that a friend sent me a tip sheet thing on it. And it said hair band songs from the 80s wanted. And he goes, didn't you have long curly hair in the 80s? It's like, yeah. He goes, well, you got any music like that? So I sent it to him, and the song's been in like 7 movies now.
Oh,
Awesome.
And
That's a great
but
story.
it came from my old long curly metal hair from the 80s.
If I can throw in just a really quick interjection. So even if you are assigned with a PRO, you should still register your works with the MLC, or make sure that the works have been registered correctly on your behalf and submit your data that way. You don't need to register with a PRO to collect royalties from the MLC. And then also, we've tried to build a best-in-class customer experience team. Lindsay Major, who you'll see on a bunch of those webinars that are on our website, has a really great team. They're real people, and they are there to answer your questions. And we track all of the KPIs, a term that I learned from the operational side of the business. We track all key performance initiatives. We aim to answer calls and chats and emails with a very short turnaround. I think we're in like all phone calls are returned within like a few minutes. Maybe I'm not even doing that service. I think it might be less. So if Chris were here, he would correct me because he's very proud of this number because they work really hard to achieve that number. So the team is there for you to answer any questions that you might have. Our job, our mandate is to get you paid. So contact us and we will make sure that you're paid. And Jim, to that end, if you're having problems receiving royalties, let's talk because we pay monthly. So we should be paying you monthly, and it shouldn't be taking 5 to 8 months. We are distributing those royalties, we're collecting and distributing royalties on a monthly cadence. So let's make sure you're getting yours.
Okay, well, most of my stuff just went in recently, so
okay, gotcha.
Yeah. But it looks like Alicia has posted a bunch of little links over in the meeting chat for the MLC. Which is really cool. And then Rick Denzin also puts down, Harry Fox is still selling time-based mechanical licenses. How can a small label what is that? A small label properly license on demand? There you go. That's a good question. I know Rick owns a small label. Anyone have that?
Well, license for what? License to Spotify and streaming services, or to license for a commercial or a movie, or what are we talking about?
Everything. I think
Rick,
everything.
Hey, Helen, Rick is right below you in the chat.
Oh, I see it now. What he's saying, time-based mechanical license. Yeah. I don't even know what that is. Does anyone know what that is?
Yeah, so here's an example. So I worked with Justin Gorini, and we recorded a song called What You Won't Do for Love. Right. And it was right after he got dropped from RCA. So we picked him up. And the song is done moderately well, you know, it produces income consistently. But under the current model, I have to go after the license myself as a label. So if you go to Harry Fox Agency, they'll go, oh, yeah. You can buy a license for like 1,000 downloads, and then you'll have to but if you don't reach the 1,000 downloads in this calendar year, you'll have to pay for that license again, right? It seems like an absurd system, and nobody can make money doing that, or more, and much less administer it, you know.
I'll just jump in for once. I'm not familiar with that, but I do know, you know, for example, if you put your songs downloads, which, you know, not many people do, but if we're talking about streaming services will pay out the publishers of the song. You don't have to do that. And also, I had a question for Rick in terms of sorry, go ahead, Rick. Were you going to correct?
No, I mean, that's right. That's what the MLC is for. If a service is using sound recordings that include musical works and they have a license for the mechanical license, then they report and pay their publishing to us, and we distribute it to writers. So they're paying the labels separately, and they're paying us for works used under that blanket license, and then we pass that all through to the writers.
And when you say license, Rick, you mean like he has a deal with Justin Guarini or whoever for that song, that is a first use license, for example.
So no, that's separate. His deal, Rick's deal with a artist, right? For that includes publishing. I'm losing it here. So Rick has a label. Rick signed an artist. That artist is using publishing. That's not that they didn't write themselves, right? They're
Correct.
using. Yeah.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. So that deal there, that has to be done outside of the blanket license. The blanket license that the MLC administers is just digital audio uses, and it's just for digital services. Digital music providers is the technical term within the Copyright Act. You can still rely on a compulsory license, but it's not covered by a blanket. You have to do a one-to-one license, right? You can either do a direct deal with the writer of that work, or you can get a compulsory blanket license, a compulsory non-blanket license through the old mechanisms, which is you have to serve it on the person, or you could serve it. I don't know if you can still serve it on the Copyright Office. I'm a little bit out of that world since I left the record label. But
Do
yeah,
you have
that's
to go to
still-
Harry Fox? Do you still have to use Harry Fox?
Harry Fox is one of a couple administrators that will
Right.
do that clearance for you. I
Mhm.
think MRI is another one that will do that, and there's a couple others too. But Harry Fox is the one that's most well known, I'd say. Yeah. Yeah, and so Rick, and then you can like some services will let you pass through, will let that work, that sound recording be available for download on their service, and they will rely on the license that you previously cleared as a pass through, and so they'll distribute the download. You'll be responsible for still paying the mechanical royalty in that sense.
Well, I own the recording, but I don't own the song.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So
The publishing of the
right.
song, right?
So you have to
Song.
clear it one way or the other.
Right.
And then some services that do downloads will allow you, will rely on your passing through, saying that you have the right to use the composition to let your work be distributed through their service.
So I guess that goes back to the first question, which really, if you peel it back, was what's the best way to do that? Harry Fox is just a desert, you know. There's got to be a better way.
Rick, what were the other services that you mentioned?
I only found Harry Fox.
Oh, sorry, I meant the other Rick, Marshall.
Sorry.
Rick.
Yeah.
No, that's okay. I was trying to see about getting you that resource.
Yeah,
please.
Music Reports Inc. Although I don't know if they're still doing one-to-one licenses, and Harry Fox, and there might be others that I'm missing. But those are the ones.
Yeah, and you can, Rick Denzing, you can contact the publisher directly and see if they'll send you a license. That's the way I do most of the stuff with independent record labels. Is I just talk to them, and I send them a license, and they pay me straight out. Then I don't have to I can avoid Harry Fox, which I know can be a desert too, because there's stuff there. Well, I'm still waiting. We put something through Harry Fox, and we're still waiting to get paid from an artist in Germany, and we've tried everything, and we still haven't. They've even tried stuff, and nothing.
Well, collecting internationally is a whole other thing. I mean, and there's lots from royalties to mechanical royalties to streaming royalties to performance royalties. And a lot of people do have folks like Vintage, handling neighboring rights for recordings made or partially made overseas. It can get both complex and tiresome trying to figure it all out. So hopefully we've answered some of the questions as best we could. I don't think we got to everybody or everything. Helen, if you could, like, there's questions, I'd be happy to respond by email afterwards if there's some things we didn't get to. I know there was a lot of stuff I was trying to follow along, but
yeah, if you guys want to throw your contact in the chat for everyone to take down if they want to contact you after this. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining us. This was a great conversation. I hope everybody who joined us had a good time. David, do you have any more closing remarks?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to all of you. Thanks to Helen for putting this together. You guys were great. Really, a round of applause for all of you. Our next session is March 30th, 12 p.m. Eastern. How to use social media to propel your business. We got two fine ladies who are going to be speaking on the panel with great experience. We'll be sending out some information about that. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. Thanks again.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Helen.
Thanks so much for
Thank
having
you,
me.
Elizabeth. Thank you, William. Thank you, Eric.
pleasure.
Yeah, everybody have a great weekend.
You too, Jim.
You too.
Take care.
Thanks for having us. Bye-bye.
Thanks.